shortly. We're about 75% complete already with that retraction. Once that retraction is completed, we'll keep an eye out for the 12 ready to hook indicators. Once those are ready, those 12 hooks will begin to engage, and that'll securely attach Dragon to the International Space Station.
Yeah, so right now the vehicle confirming that the soft capture system is deployed correctly and is fully retracted. And then once the soft capture system is fully retracted, that'll set up the vehicle to put in the hard capture pins. There's 12 of those around the docking ring, and that's what creates that airtight seal between the Dragon spacecraft and the International Space Station. The volume between, which we refer to as the vestibule, is currently not pressurized. Of course, it was just exposed to the vacuum of space until literally minutes ago, about 4 minutes ago. So just waiting for the vehicle to get that.
Dragon SpaceX, ring retraction complete. Docking sequence is holding for MCS reconfiguration.
All right, so we see those ready to hook indicators are lighting up green. So we should be just about to step into those 12 hooks beginning to engage to get that secure mate between Dragon and the International Docking Adapter on the space station.
Wow, right now those two vehicles are flying together. They are attached to each other.
It's been just under 19 hours since we lifted off. We're actually at about 18 hours, 58 minutes, and 42 seconds. So we promised about a 19-hour ride up to station, and we made it just a few minutes before that. They were able to dock a few minutes ahead of schedule. We were tracking them to still take about another 10 minutes, but able to step through all of their burns about 16 minutes ahead of schedule and get us to where we are now. If you missed it just a few moments ago, that initial docking coming at 7:16 a.m. Pacific, 10:16 a.m. over on the east coast of the United States, and they were 262 statute miles flying together over the northern border of China and Mongolia. So really exciting. We're just waiting for this docking complete to be confirmed. We'll expecting to hear some words, obviously, from the crew on board and all the excited teams down here. We're just waiting for this moment. And then it's time to start getting Dragon integrated into the station. There will be an umbilical that will get mated, and that'll allow Dragon to flow data and power into the station systems, and then it'll be over to the crew.
Endeavour and station at Houston on the big loop. MCS is configured. We're proceeding with hook driving.
All right, and they did a quick, so the motion control system onboard station now back under those control moment gyros, so handed over from the Russian thrusters, and Dragon now given the go to drive those hooks. We have to do that changeover of attitude control before we drive those hooks, as the Russian thrusters a little bit more dynamic in their control of attitude, and if you had a thruster firing while you were starting to drive those hooks, that could miss a line. So going over to the smoother control moment gyros on the U.S. side, now controlling the attitude on board the station, and those hooks, those 12 hooks on Dragon, about to start driving.
Right now, Dragon and ISS attached, just flying off the east coast of China, just underneath Japan. Attached to each other. We recently passed over to the orbital night, so we're on the currently the dark side of the world. And actually, we're lucky enough to see soft capture happen just as we were crossing over the Terminator line.
And if you're wondering what you're looking at, this is one of the cameras on the very outboard part of the Japanese experiment module, looking back in towards the very front part of Node 2, where Dragon is currently docked. We are in an orbital nighttime. That's why everything is so dark. But you're looking at Dragon. It is horizontal to the ground. So the hatch part is right where that green light pretty much is. You can see the nose cone still illuminated above it, and it is currently attached to an international docking adapter on the International Space Station.
And inside that capsule are Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley, first astronauts to fly on a privately developed vehicle up to the International Space Station. But test pilots got to do some fun tests today. Have a few more steps before they can actually get aboard and ingress to the International Space Station. And that's what we heard over the big loop, that transition, which allows us to then proceed with hard capture.
And we're seeing the first set of hooks. So the first 6 out of the 12 are now closed, 6 more to go.
Again, there are 12 of those along the ring. And that helps us ensure that we have an airtight seal. It is vacuum around them right now, so we want to make sure we're keeping all of that valuable life support in the vehicle. Now the combined ISS Dragon vehicle.
Meanwhile, inside the capsule, Bob and Doug also standing by for this hard capture to complete. And once we have that docking complete call, they'll be able to start stepping through a number of procedures to get them ready to move into the International Space Station. They'll get the go-ahead to doff or get out of their suits, and then they'll have some activities on the Dragon side to prepare for the hatch opening. Chris Cassidy will mainly be working on the station side to pressurize the vestibule. So as Shiv has talked about, the space between the Dragon capsule and the space station was exposed to vacuum. And even after this tight seal has occurred, will still be that
And Dragon SpaceX, with that, ground will be enabling hardline power and comm connection shortly. You are go to doff your suits per procedure 4.012. We will be configuring your video to go external shortly, and we have one request for Bob's suit doffing when you're ready to copy.
We copy all. Go ahead for Bob's suit.
During your approach suit leak check, we noticed Bob's suit pass with a lower PSID than his previous vehicle and O&C checks. We still had plenty of margin to support you in a depress, but in order to rule out potential hardware issues, when Bob is doffing, after he opens his structural zipper, check all 3 bladder zipper heads to see if any are partially closed. It is possible that if the head is backed off slightly, that the white tooth is partially visible or a small gap can be seen between the end of the zipper head and the gasket end. Please report observations.
Copy. Bob will take a close look at his zippers when he doffs, and he'll get doffing first, so we'll let you know as soon as we see something or if we see something.
Great. Thank you so much.
Wow. So now Dragon has completed its docking sequence. There's a number of checks. That was an absolutely historic moment. And in spite of that, the ground team's getting right back to business, talking about the suit performance.
Just let us know when the interior cameras are secure.
On Dragon to ground,
turn the cameras off first before we can get them out of their suits.
Absolutely. So spacecraft is now docked. They've got several tasks that they're going to need to be able to do. While we're waiting for those tasks to happen, we're actually going to take a short break. But if in case you just missed it, the Dragon spacecraft is now docked to the International Space Station, docked at 7:16 a.m. local time.
Yep.
Bob and Doug are at the space station.
Yeah, they're there. It was just under a 19-hour journey from their launch to their docking, so pretty much right on what we were expecting. They got there a little bit early today, which was nice, as they were able to get through all those burns. But I mean, they're docked. It's going to be a little while. They have to do that vestibule pressurization, and then they'll have to do some leak checks.
Dragon on Dragon to ground for Bob. I've got both structural zippers on my gloves lowered, and I do see white teeth visible on both sides. It looks like a full white tooth. I'll give you an update once I get to the leg zipper.
Copy. White teeth on both sides, and we'll await your next status.
So the crew right now just going through some checks of their gloves. They're about to get out of their suits. That'll be the first step for the crew on board Dragon. For the crew on board station, Chris Cassidy is going to start getting that vestibule pressurized, and then they're going to do leak checks. So they're going to be actually taking atmosphere from station, putting it into that vestibule. And then once we get all the leak checks done, things are thermally stabilized, it'll be time for hatch opening. We'll be able to see Bob and Doug get into the space station for the first time from on board the Dragon spacecraft. And again, for Doug Hurley, this is the exact port he was at almost 9 years ago when he was on the very last space shuttle mission. And now he's commanding the first commercial vehicle to dock with the International Space Station. I think that's going to do it for us in Hawthorne. We're going to give you into the very capable hands of Gary Jordan to take you through the rest of the hatch opening. We're going to be watching from here and following along. We can't wait to see these crew members on board the International Space Station. Thank you for everybody who tuned in. We hope you enjoyed the launch. We hope you enjoyed the ride uphill. We really hope you were with us every single moment from suit up until now. So you've been up for over 24 hours. But it's been an incredible experience for us to see these guys get on board the International Space Station, to watch Dragon go through the paces, to be lofted into orbit on Falcon 9. Something we've been waiting for years, seeing it come to fruition. I'm still grappling with.
Dragon SpaceX on Dragon
really
to ground.
Incredible.
Video is
and
no
Shiv,
interior.
It was an honor doing this with you today.
Yeah, absolutely, Dan. They
Dragon copies. Thanks, Anna.
can't step on the crew. That's the
on the
rule.
yeah.
But, there were some really great words there from all the flight control teams about how this was a joint partnership between NASA and SpaceX. I think everyone is over the moon here at SpaceX for this. Bob and Doug have got to be excited, and now back to business to get the vestibule ready to go and then get them on board the station. So again, thank you for following us. Please continue to watch as Gary takes over for the hatch opening portion, and keep following our social media for more updates on what's happening with hatch open.
Over to you, Gary.
Thank you, Shiva. Thank you, Dan. What an incredible flight for Bob and Doug, lifting off just yesterday and now in space, attached to the International Space Station. Some kind words all over after docking at 9:16 a.m. Central and a hard mate just 11 minutes later. We're still not done here. We're going to take you through the pressurization sequence and eventually hatch opening the International Space Station.
SpaceX Dragon on Dragon to ground. Cabin mic check, Tom.
And I hear you loud and clear on Dragon to ground. How many?
Loud and clear.
Excellent.
Good comm checks. We still have a lot of work to do here. We're going to pressurize the vestibule and eventually get...
And SpaceX Dragon with an update from Bob. It looks like white tooth on the leg zipper as well. We'll take a close look if we can see anything else that might have resulted in that lower leak check pressure.
Copy. Really appreciate the report. Thank you.
Teams behind me will be configuring the Dragon and the International Space Station to welcome Bob and Doug aboard. First, of course, the International Space Station attitude control moment gyros, really holding the Dragon in place through the hard capture sequence. We'll start enabling those thrusters and pressurizing the vestibule. It'll take about an hour until we're able to get the hatch open. The teams here in Mission Control Houston Orbit 2, led by Flight Director Zeb Scoville, will be taking us through that process. Aboard the International Space Station, Commander Chris Cassidy standing by in Node 2. Right in front of that is the pressurized mating adapter. He recently opened up the hatch to introduce some of the station air and mix it, get a nice mix in there, avoiding some CO2 pockets. That hatch you see just beyond Chris Cassidy there is normally closed. He was able to open it a little bit earlier today, mix some of that cabin air, and get rid of those CO2 pockets, make sure it's all clean and ready for Bob and Doug. He closed it shortly after just to make sure no FOD or foreign objects, anything were to float in there that would inhibit any hatch opening process today. One of the next milestones for Chris Cassidy will be to open up that hatch. He's got some cameras you see placed within that node. We'll get some good views of the hatch opening and welcoming Bob and Doug here in just about an hour. A big moment in history today, May 31st, 2020. Just on the other side of that hatch, Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley have successfully arrived at the International Space Station. Still a couple of milestones to get through. Before we can open up that hatch, it's going to take some time. First, pressurizing the vestibule in between the station and Dragon. We'll bring that up to pressure. It's going to take some time for that pressure to stabilize. Of course, the temperature within that vestibule causes a little bit of swing, so we'll just wait for that to pressurize or to stabilize before opening up that hatch. Here at Mission Control Houston, Flight Director Zeb Scoville welcoming the director of the NASA Johnson Space Center, Mark Geyer. We'll have a few other VIPs here in the room to welcome Bob and Doug once they get through that hatch. Now again, this repressurization and hatch opening process is going to take some time. You see now we're going to have some intermittent losses with the communication from the International Space Station. You're seeing now the International Space Station Flight Control Room led by Flight Director Zeb Scoville. Just a handover of some of those audio and visual communications. We'll be regaining those shortly. Might lose them intermittently throughout the repressurization process, but the teams here will be monitoring all of the procedures. Again, pressurizing that vestibule and eventually getting to that hatch opening. From right to left there, seated, you see Flight Director Zeb Scoville. It was he who was leading the teams for both the launch of Bob and Doug over at the Cape. He was leading the teams here in Mission Control Houston. You just saw the Johnson Space Center Director Mark Geyer walk off to the side. Seated next to Zeb Scoville, Joshua Kutrick. He is one of the members of the most recent class of astronauts, the class of 2017. Canadian Space Agency astronaut, went through candidate training and officially became an astronaut just recently.